Welcome to The People's View, a program dedicated to discussing local, state, and national issues and their effect on the American people. The People's View provides a platform for state representatives and national figures to present their viewpoint. Whether it's social, economic, or financial topics, you'll hear it on The People's View.
Welcome to The People's View. I'm your host, Kevin Avard, for the day. I'm filling in for Carl Seidel and Pete Silva. And today I want to introduce my guest, Cliff Hurst. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kevin. It's good to be here.
Well, now, Cliff, you are the vice chair of the New Hampshire Grand Old Party.
That's correct.
Correct. And a lot of things to talk about today. But tell us a little bit about yourself, if you don't mind.
Okay. Well, maybe I could start by talking about where I grew up. I grew up in the city of Wolcott, Vermont, a town at that time of about 800 people.
This is why John Burt likes you.
And it's up near Stowe, Vermont, for people who don't know Wolcott. And then I went to college in Boston. Soon after college, I was drafted into the Army.
Thank you for your service.
I was selected for Officers Candidate School, and I was down at Fort Dix, New Jersey, and there was an officer in there, and he was speaking rather loud. He said, if there's anybody in this room that doesn't want to be an officer of the U.S. Army more than anything, you can leave. I was the only one to leave.
Oh, no.
But what we didn't know then, this was the beginning of the build-up for the Vietnam War. This was back in 1964. And when I graduated from advanced training, about 90% of our group got APO San Francisco, which meant Vietnam. We didn't know that then, but that's what the buildup was starting. And I got APO New York, and somebody said, who do you know? And I really, it was nobody special that I knew. That's just how it happened. So I ended up going to Germany. And it was a terrible time in the history of our country because with the war going on, and Martin Luther King had been killed at that time, soon after that. And so to build morale, the Army was doing all kinds of different activities. And they had a woman come to sing in our chapel, and she sang the song, "If I can help somebody as I go my way, then my living shall not be in vain." And I've kind of taken that as how to live. But it was really interesting because when I got there, they weren't sure what to do with me. And our commander, who was soon to become a general, was in an armored division, had married late in life and had 2 young children. And my wife and I lived in to take care of the children. And his wife passed away, and so he said to me, Hurst, one day, he said, if there's anything I can ever do for you, I want to help you. And he said, I think you'd make a great chaplain because most of our chaplains are going to Vietnam and we have a tremendous shortage of chaplains. But I said, I'm really not a military person. So about a month later, he called me to his office, and I walked in, and the adjutant is there, and here's this private walking in to see Colonel Cavender. And I said, I'm here to see Colonel Cavender, and he looked at me like, I'm sure you are. And Colonel Cavender heard me out there, and he said, Hurst, come on in. He said, I've been thinking about you, and I have a friend who runs a seminary down in Switzerland. And if you'd be willing to go there, we'll help you go. And we'll give you a European discharge, which we aren't giving at this point, but I can do this as a colonel. And we'll bring you back once you finish to be a civilian clergy to the military. So after talking about it for some time, my wife and I decided that's what we'd do, even though it wasn't a particular calling for me, but a duty that I felt like I could help my country. So we loaded up our belongings in a trunk on top of our little Volkswagen Bug and went down through the Black Forest into Switzerland. I'd been there about 3 months when the phone rang one day, and it was Colonel Cavender, and he said the chaplain that was coming to the Landstuhl Medical Center isn't going to be able to come. We need you. And I said, I'm not ready. He said, Hurst, you're ready. So I drive up and back weekends, sick to my stomach, thinking I'm not sure what I'm doing. But eventually it worked out through correspondence and courses and everything, and finishing some of it at the seminary. I was ordained and served for almost 10 years in Germany.
Wow.
Got to see all of Europe. It was a wonderful experience.
That's interesting. I didn't know that. I had no idea that you had.
There's a lot of things that people don't know about me, but I thought maybe it's a good time to let them know. Then when I came back, I thought, well, this wasn't really something I would continue doing. And I met a guy who was doing electronics design in his basement. He had another job, but he had an idea. And so he called me one day after he'd come back from an electronics show in San Diego and said, I'd like to have you come to work for me. And he had about 3 or 4 people in this old barracks building at Grenier Field, which is now the Manchester Airport. And I said, well, you know, I don't know anything about electronics. What would you have me do? And he says, well, I'd like to have you do the human resources and the sales marketing. He said, our company is really going to grow. And what he didn't know, and I didn't know at the time, he'd invented the smallest switching power supply in the world for computers and some electronics equipment. So our company started to rebound and grow. And in 1986, we were selected as New Hampshire's fastest growing privately held company by the Inc. 500. Went to the Plaza Hotel in New York. Bill Gates happened to be one of the ones that was there that year, but nobody knew.
Timing is everything with
you.
That's amazing.
And soon after that, you know, somebody bought the equipment, the power supply, and the company was gone. And I went from there to be head of public relations at the Plaza Corporation. They were a big road building company, and my father had been the public relations person before and passed away from cancer. And so, but when that was over, which lasted about 8 years because Tom Plaza was getting old and closed the company down, and so I wasn't really sure what I was going to do. But I had a friend at Merrimack Street, Volvo, and I knew some people there, so I thought I'll go down there until I find a job. I became one of their lead salespeople and spent 14 years there. And about 5 years ago, I left to help my son start Hurst and DeGraff and Reed Wealth Management.
That's up north?
It's actually in Bedford.
Okay, that's north.
Yeah, north of here, yeah,
Right.
We're in Nashua. And now I've come back there for a time because I served some time with the Red Cross on their board of directors. I've served on the board of Mount St. Mary's Academy, helped start Liberty Harbor Academy, and of course serving as vice chair of the party. And
tell us a little bit about your history with the party.
Yeah.
How did you get involved with the?
Well, in 2004, Ray Wazurek called me and said, Cliff, I'd like to see you become involved in the Manchester Republican Committee as the chair. And so I thought, well, if he thinks I can do it, I'll give it a shot. And so he nominated me, and Bobby Arnold, who the Arnolds were very active in the Republican Party in Manchester for years. They're up in their late 80s now, but Bill and Bobby Arnold used to meet the candidates. And
did they own a restaurant up in Concord?
I don't think so, but
Arnold.
I mean, they have a wonderful family.
Mm-hmm.
And so Ray Wazurek nominated me, Bobby Arnold seconded it. And it was a rough year, 04 was. There was a group formed against me, Republicans First, and it was just a hard year. So at the end of that year, I said to Ray Wazurek, well, I've done my year. He said, Cliff, you've got another year. You've been talking about electing a Republican mayor, and if you aren't here, that won't happen. So we started working on it with Frank Ginta, and everybody told me, Cliff, you're wasting your time. This is a Democrat city. Baines is a very, very popular mayor, and it's impossible to win. But being a stubborn Vermonter, I wasn't about to give up.
What led to your success with Ginta?
I think the success was our determination, and Mike Biendo headed up his campaign, and they had a very simple message. They stayed on message. And the Saturday before the election, Ben Gamache had donated space where Ginta's office has been. And the Saturday before the election, we had about 100 people show up to go door to door. And you probably, if you'd have been there, you'd have seen a big smile on my face, because I knew then that we had a pretty good chance of winning because of the involvement of people.
Right.
And so the night of the election, when we won, we had to wait 20 minutes for the press to arrive because they were all over at the Baines headquarters. But that was a very, very exciting night.
There's a lot of confusion right now. There's a lot of people scratching their heads because of this election. A lot of people worked hard, including myself, and were wondering what happened. I got beat by a 90-year-old woman who I didn't see out on the campaign. God bless her. May she do well.
Yes.
But I worked my butt off, and I worked hard in the community. And we did mailers, we did door knocking, we had the TV show, and yet 700 same-day registered voters came into our ward, and just people from out of town. Some from out of town, some from town. We're still not sure, but that happened all over just Nashua.
Yeah, it was all over southern New Hampshire and out at the coast. They focused, I think, in these areas. There was a very smart strategy on their part.
How do we number one, as a representative, if I'd have gotten elected, how do I represent those people that I didn't have a chance to meet? Number two, if I decide to run again, or if others decide to run again, how do we fix this problem? How do we reach these people that show up that we...
Well, I think there's some things that we need to do, but maybe before I talk about that, maybe I could, and I'll come up to it, but last year I was concerned about uniting our party, and I decided to run for vice chair of the party. And I traveled over 2,000 miles in 33 different meetings all over the state, and I saw the greatness of our party. I mean, we have incredible people in the Republican Party. We have dedicated people in the Republican Party. And we have some very, very good people. Wayne McDonald is a very good man. And I really enjoyed being the vice chair. And one of the things that they asked me to be on the finance committee. And we had one of the most successful fundraisers in the history of the party when Mike Huckabee came for our annual dinner, and we raised well over $80,000, and that was really great. And I've been fortunate to be one of the largest fundraisers in the state. But I think some of the things that we need to do is we need to build an excellent database. I mean, a database that is second to none. And I think we need to be more aggressive in registering voters. And, those two things I'm just thinking off the top that we need to do. Because, I know we can analyze, and I think that's good to analyze what happened and to look at it and to be thoughtful and intelligent in evaluating where we go from here.
But the unity seems to be one of the...
But the unity, I think, is such an important thing, because in 2010, we involved almost 1,000 people in the Manchester Republican Committee. We had a fundraiser that was just amazing. And see, the difference is a team. I think team is everything. You got to have leadership, but you got to have good people as a team. And we had a team in 2010 in Manchester that was second to none. And they had some great ideas. And one of the ideas they had was to create a New Hampshire button. And we had a candidate fair. It was in August. And we decided to print up 500 buttons, and they would be the entrance into the fair, and they'd sell for $20.10 a piece. Well, we sold all 500 and ran out of buttons. And the union leader estimated our crowd at 500, but we knew we had more than 500 because we'd sold the 500 buttons and we're still selling.
Right.
And we raised almost $12,000 that day by selling $20.10 buttons. But it just shows what can happen if you've got a good team.
Right.
And I think, that we need to be, some way to get unified. And my approach was, and our team's approach was in Manchester was a similar approach. Not we're comparing ourselves to Ronald Reagan, but he said, if you're 80%, come on in. And I don't think it's the thing about calling somebody a libertarian, a Tea Party, or Republican.
Yep.
We come together because we have a common belief and a common purpose.
I think that's one of the strengths of our party, though, that I've discovered, is the fact that we are so diverse. The misnomer of the Republican Party, there's the libertarians, there's the Tea Parties, there's the HRA, the old guard, if you will, conservatives, social. It's so diverse.
Yes.
And when we got there back at the House when I got elected, everybody was saying, well, this is like herding a bunch of cats. How do you? It's just so many people that are individuals, and to bring them together, that's a task.
Well,
Whereas we don't walk lockstep and just do as we're commanded from on high. It's just the opposite. The projection from the media has been amazing.
Yeah, and the Democrats, they are in lockstep and we aren't. But I think one of the ways to bring that together, and what I saw in 2010 with that large group of people that we brought together in Manchester was, if everybody, my strong feeling is everybody matters. Like when I was running for vice chair, they advised me to get 100 supporters. So I'd go out and talk to people and I'd say, would you support me? They said, yeah, Cliff, I'd support you, but nobody knows me. I mean, in other words, I don't really matter. But I said, you do. Everybody matters. Everybody's important. You're a human being. You matter.
Right.
And I think we need to get to that point of where we value every person. I mean, we all have different gifts and abilities to do certain things well, but we need each other. And I've used that in business. I've used that, as a chaplain. I used it, in everything I've ever done. And I really believe it works. It's not magic or anything. It's just treating people good and making friends with people and being sincere and being honest about everything. And I don't think, and I know there are people that need to be the bulldogs and the tough people, and I realize my strengths and weaknesses. And if I do decide to run for chair, and if I was elected chair, I know where my strengths and weaknesses are. I'm not a technical person, but I know some technical people who would be willing to work to put together a database that would be second to none. I know some people who can...
You're taking the Henry Ford approach.
Yeah, and
surrounding yourself with people who know what the heck they're doing, right?
Yeah, and I know people who can, go out there and be tough. I can be tough, but I mean, in maybe the way that's beyond what I would be comfortable doing in a way that I would be comfortable doing it. But I found if I could put a team together to win the mayorship of Manchester, I mean, Karl Rove came to me one day and he said, "You're Cliff Hurst." And I said, "Yes." He said, "I want to shake your hand." I said, "Why in the world would you want to shake my hand?"
Because you matter.
He said, "Because you had the biggest victory in the Republican Party in 2005 in the nation. Sometimes it's better you don't know how bad things are." But when I was in college in Boston, one of the things that really impressed me, I got to hear Dr. Carl Menninger speak. And he said something that night, and how much do we really remember what anybody says? But that night he says, attitudes are more important than facts. If you have a positive attitude, it's amazing what you can accomplish. And I saw that with my father as he was head of public relations for Pulaski's. And anytime there was a problem, they would send him in, and he'd be meeting with some selectmen or whatever, and he would listen. He was a good listener. And they'd go on and, get all their complaints out, and he'd listen and listen. He'd stay there sometimes way late, 11 or 12 o'clock at night, still listening. And when he walked out, everybody was shaking hands.
By being a good listener.
Being a good listener.
Right.
And it's not easy to be a good listener. In fact, I'm not sure how good I'm listening to you today. But it's an art. And
that's all right. Nobody's watching the show anyway. I'm kidding.
But
I'm teasing.
But it is important to listen. And I think when you listen to people, it's amazing. And listening, I think, gives value to the other person too, because if you listen, then they sense, well, yeah, maybe I do have something to say.
And I think as a freshman, or that you can be overwhelmed with I'm talking as an elected official, being in the party. I could sense with there certain reps that had an air about them, and I couldn't get too close to them. One of the things that I tried to do while I was there at the house, I got a bag of candy, and I went to every rep that was there, both Democrats and Republicans, and I started passing out the candy. I don't know what compelled me to do it. At first it was a little joke, here, you want a mint? But then I saw the value to that and how that it just, it broke down a barrier. And I thought, oh, okay, now, I handed this person a piece of candy. Now I become the candy man. And a lot of people started searching me out because we'd have to sit next to each other with bad breath in those seats. But the value of that is to break down that wall. And on the Democratic side, some took the candy, and it brought a smile to their face. It brought a smile to some people have an air about them, they just do. And it just seemed to break down their guard. Okay, well, I'll let you into my little private area, if you will. And breaking down those walls is very important. And there are a lot of strong feelings in our party. There are a lot of people with, outside being the reps. I mean, you have some very strong libertarians, very strong Tea Parties, very strong conservatives. And boy, they can go head to head. They need to talk because they're really on the same side.
They want the same thing, basically.
It's just how they want to get to it. And that does take leadership. And
I think, like Vince Lombardi said, leadership isn't something, leadership is everything.
Right.
But I thought about Vince Lombardi, too, after this election. When I thought about what he said, the team that recovers the fastest wins the championship. And I thought, we can't spend a lot of time, moaning and groaning
right.
and feel defeated. We've got to be up and ready and fighting. Yeah. And while we need to evaluate and look at things and, but we need to move ahead. Yeah,
I agree. And I could be honest, could confess that I kind of had a couple of days of depression. What happened? What happened? I went to the Romney event the night before. Wow, every seat.
I was there. I mean, that was probably, to me, one of the most exciting nights. Probably the most exciting night I ever spent in politics.
Every chair was full.
It was amazing.
Yeah, light laser show, and however you got Kid Rock there in Romney in the same room. Yeah. Oh, that's unity.
Yeah.
But the next day, it was just amazing, amazing. But the depression kind of set in, and so I just turned on some blues and cranked it up, and all right, I'm back.
It's amazing what music can do, right?
Music is my that's my alcohol.
Yeah.
So, have you made a determination whether you will run, or are you still considering?
No, but I mean, like I say, the draft thing came up. I had John DeStaso called me, and I said, I had nothing to do with the draft. I heard about it and didn't feel bad about them doing it. But he said, you know, have you made a decision to run? I said, no, I haven't, but I am seriously thinking about it. And I said, I want to talk to Wayne McDonald first because he's been a good friend to me for years,
Right.
and I respect the office. And he said, well, if he runs, would you run against him? I said, well, I want to talk with him,
Right.
you know, and see. And I realized, you know, that there are other people that are considering running or, you know, in the process of making a decision. And I respect everybody because I think that's the wonderful part of being an American. We have the freedom to run for office. We have the freedom to vote.
Yeah.
And nobody's going to get shot or anything for doing it.
Have you thought about writing a book? Every time I see you at every event, wherever you're at, it doesn't matter what, when, or where. You've got a joke, you've got a line, you've got something to cheer me up, or something. It's funny. It just kind of rolls right off your chest.
Well, I was thinking about growing up in the town of Wolcott, where the Center for Northern Studies was, and a draft was something I would feel often under the door. So they said when they had a draft for Cliff Hurst, I thought, well, that wasn't the first draft that I ever had.
Well, anybody who knows you, even at a short period of time, knows that you've got a good sense of humor.
You know, I got to tell you this, and everybody's heard this over probably so many times, but I think about the budget hearing at City Hall in Manchester that night. It was so contentious, and, you know, people were really angry. You talk about people being angry at the city and angry with each other, and it was just, you know, so it was my turn to speak, so I put my notes in my pocket, and that was the night when I got up, and Mayor Baines was so stressed. You could see the stress on his face, and I said, you know, I have a pet rabbit. And he looked at me because he knew me. I'd been
I'd have started laughing right then and there.
I'd been president of the parent-teacher organization when he was mayor, when he was principal for both of my sons at West High School. And I said, I have a pet rabbit. And the aldermen are kind of really looking at me. And I said, I take him out for a walk every morning. And one morning I was out walking him, and a guy stopped me and said, did you lose your hair? And I said, no, he's right here. People do not notice the most important things. But I thought he was never going to stop laughing. I mean, he laughed and laughed and laughed because of his stress.
Right.
But it really changed the whole meeting. And I think sometimes, you know, we get so taken up with ourselves, you know, we don't see how ridiculous we really are,
right.
Our behavior. And humor kind of lightens things up. And
it certainly does.
And I think a sense of a positive attitude and joy and a spirit of positive looking at life does matter. Not that you don't face reality and you don't face difficulties and you don't have hard days, but
happiness is a choice.
Yeah, we have a decision, and and we decide every day what kind of a attitude we're going to have. Yeah. But as manager says, attitudes are more important than facts.
Well, I wish you the best. Thank you for coming on People's View. Is there anything else that you want our viewers to know a little bit about you? Or
well, if you really think that I would be a good chair, there is a draft on
Facebook.
Draft Cliff Hurst for an HGOP chair or something like that.
I think you'll see that I've already done that,
yeah,
by the way.
If you go on and like it, I will like you. If you don't, I'll like you too.
That's fine.
Thank you.
I've actually done that myself, so and I wish you the best, and I'm glad, thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, and thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for joining us for the People's View. Cliff Hurst, and a very funny man, a very interesting man, and his message of unity within the party is a good message, and one that we all need to hear. And so until next week, thank you for watching the People's View. Again, I'm Kevin Avard, and Cliff Hurst, my guest.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cliff.